Hey coders, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we are going to finish off the front end side of our e-commerce website by implementing, let's go to, let's say, feature properties. Click on one of the properties. So this is the web page that we are going to implement. Over here, we will be learning how to implement a slider without using any kind of libraries. So this is the slider which represents all the images or contains all the images that belong to that particular property that we clicked and moved to this particular property. So this is the slider. Then over here we have some basic properties like the address, then number of bedrooms and bath, and whether it's for sale or for rent, then the price. And then over here we have further details. If the viewer want to arrange a viewing or get further information regarding this property, they can send a message to the website people using this form. So this is our today's aim. Obviously we are going to make it responsive as well. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so this is our demo project. Now let's go to the project that we are building. So this is the page that I've already created, details.html. Okay, so this is the page called details.html, which at the moment only contains the basic HTML with header and footer. So that's why you see what you see over here. Because currently it's empty, so our footer is behind the header. That's why you can see this blue shade over here, because that's the shade of the footer. Now let's put in the contents that will represent this look. So as usual, we are going to create a section which will first of all contain a container which will have all these images. So the section will contain one div which will represent the slider. Then we will have another section for this information, and then we will have third section. So sorry, not section, the div. So one div for this information and another div for this information, the details one. So this is basic info and this is the detailed info. Then over here in the fourth div we have this form. Okay, so let's get started with our slider. Let's go down where our header ends. Let's create a section. Let's give it class name property details. Now there, let's create a div slider container. Now as far as the contents of this slider container div are considered, so this will basically contain three children. We have this left arrow, then the images and the right arrow. So we have three children. A button for this left arrow, second one is going to be images, and the third one is going to be the right arrow. So let's start with the button. Let's give it two classes. The first one is arrow and the second one is going to be left arrow. So this arrow class will define the properties, CSS properties that apply to both left and right arrows. This particular class, left arrow, will only define the CSS properties that belong to left arrow, as well as some utilization for this class in our JavaScript as well, because this is going to be the unique class name through which we can refer to this button in our JavaScript. This one is going to be a common class. Now for the left angle, we are going to use HTML entity 10094. Okay, so let's copy paste it. Let's change the class name to right arrow. And for the HTML entity 10095. Okay, so these two are buttons. Now in between these two buttons, we have to place in all the images. So for that, we are going to create a container. So we are going to use a div with the class name slider. So this will actually contain all the images. So let me bring in all the images. The source is going to be images, and let's bring in some random images. Let's delete this, copy paste it multiple times. 2, 4, 6. Okay. Now let's change. Let's start with kitchen 2, bath 5, front 6, okay. Let's select something from interior 11, interior 18. Okay. Okay, so these are the images, and this is all the HTML, at least as far as the slider is considered. So we will define the rest later on. Or shall we complete our HTML first? Okay, let's start with the div for the basic info. let's create a paragraph with the class name lane. So this will basically contain the lane in which the house resides. We don't want the exact house number, so this will contain basically the street name or something like that. So it's going to be something address without house number, or shall we call it street name? Street name. We need a paragraph which will tell us the city. We are currently making it static because we don't have any backend defined yet. Once we have the backend available, so all this information will be filled in automatically. Even these images will change automatically based on the images associated with that particular property in our database. So over here, we will not only have a city, but postcode as well. Again, these are not hard and fast rules. I mean, we can have as much information about the property or as less with respect to the address, where the address is concerned. Because we probably don't want the viewers of your website to directly go to that property and communicate with the owners. So you probably don't want to put in all the information there. Then let's create a paragraph for the bedrooms. So this will contain two spawns. Let's give them class name bed, and this will contain a HTML entity which will represent the bed symbol. So ampersand hash, this is hexadecimal value 1F6CF. Okay, we have to make sure that we give the semicolon, otherwise the icon will not be displayed properly. I forgot to put in the semicolons over here, which I now already have. So make sure you place in the semicolon, and you don't need to memorize these values because you can search on the net and copy paste it. Okay, so number of bedrooms is going to be 2, then comma, and now the bathrooms. So another span, let's give it class name bathroom, and the HTML entity for the shower icon is copy this, paste it, and it's 1F6C1 for the shower. So this is the shower icon. Let me put in the semicolon. And 1F6CF is for the bed icon. And the number of bathroom, let's put in 1.5. So 1 means it's a complete bathroom along with the shower or the bathtub, and this one is something like a powder room, which means just toilet. Okay, so we are done with this basic info div as well. Now let's move on to the details info. It is a heading, so H2 property details. Then we have a paragraph. Let's give it a class name. So property features. Property features go here. Let's make it unique property features go here. Then another paragraph with the class name property description. Property description goes here. Again, these two paragraphs will be filled in automatically from the database, but since we don't have any backend at the moment, so we are putting in static text. Okay, so after that we need a form. Property content form. So as far as the form is concerned, we are going to reuse the form that we have created for our landing page. So let's go and have a peek at the landing page. Okay, so let's go to the home, contact us. Okay, so this is our form. We are going to copy paste it, and then if we find the need, we will modify this form for the specific property. So let's go to the landing page, which was index.html. Okay, so this is the form. Copy this whole thing and paste it over here. Probably we need to give this div the same class name that this form has, so that the properties that we have defined for this div also gets applied to this div as well. Now let's have a peek. Okay, so we are on the landing page. Let's go back to the details page. So this is the image. So these are all the images, and then this is the button, the right button. So let's check if we have left button. So it should be somewhere over here, hidden behind the header. We will fix this later. Okay, then we have this basic info, then detailed info. This is the H2, and then we have this contact form. So now we can start working on styling this part. So we are going to start working on the slider first. Okay, so what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create another style file just for this page. So let's give it the class name slider. So slider.css, and we are also going to define a separate script file. Let's make it slider.js as well. Let's make it defer as well so that the JavaScript file gets loaded after the contents of this index.html, the details.html file has been loaded. Okay, so let's create these two files now. Slider.css and slider.js. Let's start with the styling first. So we are going to start with the slider container. Okay, so first thing we are going to set position relative because then this can act as an anchor or reference point for its children. Okay, then the width is going to be 100% of the viewport width. But if it's more than 800 pixels, then we want it to get confined to maximum 800 pixel width. I mean, if the width of the screen is greater than 800 pixels, then we don't want, then we don't want the width of this div to go beyond 800 pixels. Therefore, we have to define another property called max width, and it's going to be 800 pixels. So as long as the width is less than or equal to 800 pixels, it should occupy the whole screen or whole viewport area. But if the screen is bigger than 800 pixels, then the width of this div shouldn't go beyond 800 pixels. So this is what these two properties collectively are defining. So margin is going to be auto. Okay. Then we want overflow to be hidden. Let me comment this out for the time being. Well, even though I'm commenting this out, but this property is very, very important. But in order to show its importance, I'm commenting it out. Okay, now for the border. Solid 2 pixels and color is going to be next. Let's define some properties for the slider div, which actually contain all of the images. Now, because this div contains multiple images, so we are going to set its display property to flex. And since the default flex direction is row, we want to keep that default direction, so we don't need to define that. And since we will be using some transitioning properties when we click on the left and right arrows, so in order to make those transitions smooth, let's define some properties for the transition. So the transition is going to be, it should be applied transform. On the transform property, it should take 0.5 seconds. And the style is going to be ease in out. Okay. Now let's target the slider image. So the image which is inside the slider. So we want the width of each image to be 100% of the parent container. So since the parent of this image is the slider, but this one doesn't have defined any properties, but their parent, which is slider container, has width defined. So this image will also get the same properties, the same width dimensions. Now, before we define another property, let's go and have a peek. Okay, so this is how it looks. Okay, so this is first image. Then because the flex direction is row, so we can see these a part of second image. And because we have defined overflow X to be hidden, that's why we don't see the rest of the images. But you can already figure out that all the images are in the horizontal direction in a single row. This is first image, then there is the second image, and beyond the screen size, there is third image, fourth, and all these 6 images are in the row or in the same row. But because of the overflowing of the horizontal direction, we don't see the rest of the images. Okay, now what we have to do is that we have to define properties such that only one image gets visible, and that image is going to be the one which is currently present in this slider div. So this is the dimension of the slider div. So the image that fits in that area, only that portion of the image should be visible. So for that, what we are going to do is that we will define the overflow hidden property for the parent of this slider div, not the div itself, but the parent over here. So this is the parent slider container. For that, we are going to define overflow is hidden, because the second image was already overflowing out of this slider div and was placed inside the slider container div. Now, as you can see, we can't see the rest of the images because the rest of the images are overflowing out of this slider div and they are being leaked into the slider container div. And for that, we have set the overflow property to be hidden. That's why we don't see those images. However, now you know that those images are present over here towards the right side of these images. Now, this is the case where we have a big enough image which fits into this area. But what if the image was smaller? In that case, the second image would have tried to push in and probably half of or a portion of that image would have been visible in this area. We don't want this condition to ever occur. So we want whatever is the image, we want it to occupy the whole area or the whole width of this slider div. And for that, we are going to set another property for the image, and which is flex shrink, and we are going to set it to 0. That means under no circumstances this image or any image which is currently occupying the slider div should shrink so that the remaining images which are towards the right of this image should fit into this area. In other words, whatever image is present over here should occupy the whole width of this slider div. Now what we need to do is that we need to work on these buttons, the arrow buttons. But before that, let's push this slider a bit further down so that we can see the other button as well. So let's go to this slider container, and this one is defining margins for all the sides. So we make sure that we define the property margin top after this. Otherwise, let's put in hrem first. So if we define margin top before this margin auto, then this margin auto will override this property. But we want this property to override this property as far as the top is concerned. So we have to make sure that margin top comes after this margin auto property. Okay, so now this div, the slider container div, has been pushed down, and as a result we can see this left button as well. Now we have to style them. So the styling that we are going to define is that we have to bring this in the center over here, and we have to bring this one in the center again, but at the right edge over here. And then we have to make it bold and color and things like that. But the important thing is we have to bring it down exactly in the center. Since both of those buttons have a common class called arrow, so let's define position absolute. Now, because this arrow is defined, or the buttons are defined inside the slider div, and this one is defined inside the slider container div, which has position relative. So this arrow will position itself with respect to this container. So now we have to say from the top, move these buttons 50% down. So position absolute brings both of these buttons over here. Let me comment this out, position absolute. So you can see, now we can see only the left arrow because the right arrow is behind it now. Both are placed over here with position absolute. So with respect to the slider container, it has been placed at the top 0 and left 0. Now we have to bring them both down over here in the center. So top 0 will bring it down to the center over here. Again, the other arrow is behind this arrow. That's why we can't see it. Okay, so actually this is right arrow. So left arrow is underneath it. So now we have to move this right arrow toward this side over here. So for that, let's define right arrow, and we are going to say property right. Let's make it 10 pixels. Okay, now you can see the property right has moved this arrow in the right side, and this is the 10 pixels area that has been left. We have to leave same amount of 10 pixels or 10 pixel space between the arrow and the edge of this image as well. So copy paste, change it to left arrow, and we have to define the property left 10 pixels, not right 10 pixels. Okay. Now we go back to the arrow class and define some further properties. Okay, so this is our arrow class. Let's remove the border. So border none. Cursor is going to be pointer. Font size, let's make it 2 rem. Let's define color and background color. Do we need background color? Let's comment this out for the time being. Have a peek. Okay, yeah. Shall we make background color transparent? Okay, so making background color transparent makes it invisible unless we change the color of the arrow itself. So what should be the color? We need to define background color. Otherwise, what if the image that we are displaying that has white area over here, then the arrow will not be visible, and we will encounter this problem no matter what color we assign to our arrows. So instead of making background transparent, we are going to give it blur properties, the glassmorphic effect. So change the color back to the previous one. Now as far as the background color is considered, let's go to the style.css and let's copy these two properties, background color and background filter. So copy, paste. Okay, that's better. We need to make it, the font size, we have to make it bigger, and we have to give it some padding as well. So the font size, let's make it 4 rem and padding all around 1 rem. Oh, let's make it 3 rem and round edges as well. So 3 rem and border radius 0.4 rem. I think this is still too big, so let's make font size 2.5 rem and we should decrease the padding all around as well. So the font size, let's make it 2.5 rem and for the padding 0.5 rem. Yeah, I think that's better. And now as far as the slider is considered, we have defined all the CSS properties. Now we have to define the JavaScript logic so that when we click on any of these arrows, let's say this right arrow, then this image gets moved over here, hence gets hidden. And the image which is basically over here should move into these dimensions in this area. And once this image will move into this area, it will be visible. So we will see a smooth transitioning effect or sliding effect from one image to another when we click on these arrows. So let's work on those two properties. So we have to define click event for both of these two buttons. So now let's go to the slider.js. Let's close this. Okay, slider.js. Now let's create two constants which represents those two buttons. Button document.query selector. The unique class given to this button is left arrow. Copy paste. We need another reference to right arrow. The name to right button. Okay, now we need to associate click event listeners to both of these. And since the functionality for both of these is same, that is move current image out of that area and bring in next one in the row. If the right arrow is clicked, the right image will be pushed in. And if the left arrow is clicked, the image to the left will be pushed in. Beyond that, the functionality is same. So we only have to define the direction. Other than the direction, the functionality is same. So for that, let's define a function first. Let's define a global variable as well, which will represent the current index. Initially, it's 0. Now let's define the function with the class name moveSlide. This will take direction as a parameter. Now over here, we need to get a reference to the div which contains these images and buttons. Since all of these images and buttons are within a div called slider, so let's create a reference to that. Document.query selector. The class name is slider. We also need to have the total number of images that are associated with the property. So we have to somehow get access to the total number of images in that slider, in this slider div. So for that, we are going to use this slider constant, slider.children. This will represent the children, that is all the images and the length. So this will give us the total number of images in this slider div. The next property is current index is equal to current value of current index plus the whatever is the value of direction. What this part is doing, it will be more clear once we associate event listeners for these two buttons. Now we are saying if current index is less than 0. In fact, before we define this, let's go up and define the event listeners. Otherwise, this logic might not make any sense to you. So what we are going to do is that we are going to associate an event listener with the left button. So the event is click, and the function that should, or the callback function that should be called or executed when the left button is clicked is this move slide. Move slide. And because the left button is clicked, so the initial value that we want to give it is -1. I'll explain to you why this is -1 in a bit. But let's copy paste it and make this one right button. And the parameter over here is positive. So the parameter that we are passing to the move slide initially associated with this left button is -1, and the move slide, which is associated with the right button, to that the initial parameter that we are passing is 1. So suppose we are currently viewing the very first image in the row. That means the index of that image is 0. And we click on the left button. So that means this function will execute. That means when this function executes, the value of direction will be -1. And the initial current index is 0. So the current index will become 0 plus -1. That means -1. So current index will be -1. So basically we are saying that if we are currently on the very first image and we still click on the left arrow button, then the current index will become -1, which is less than 0. So if that is the case, then what should happen, because there is no image with the index -1, then what should happen is that we should directly jump to the very last image. Once we directly jump to the very last image, then if we keep on clicking the left arrow button, we will have many images that we can see one by one, starting from the right to left. So since all the images are in a single row, so if the current index is -1, then directly jump to the very last image, which is at the very right end of this array, the images array. And then if we further keep on clicking the left arrow, then we will see the second last image, third last image, and eventually we will again move on to the very first image. So this is what we are defining in our logic. So if current index is less than 0, then set the current index to total images -1. So if total images are 6, then the current index will become 5. And because indexes start with 0, so the last image will have index 5. So this is what it is doing. So the current index is becoming the index of the very last image. If that is not the case, then we have to check if we are clicking on the right button, but we are already viewing the last image in this images row or images array. So for that, we have to check if current index is greater than or equal to total images. So again, if the total images are 6, so the last index will be 5. So if the current index is 5, that means we are viewing the very last image. And if we click on the right once more, we should jump back to the very first image. And if the current index is 6, that means we were on the last image, but we have already clicked on the right arrow button once more. As a result, the index has become 6. So over here we are saying if the current index is greater than or equal to total images. Now if the number of images is 6 and the current index is also 6, that means current index is equal to total images, but since there is no image with the index 6, that means we have already went past the indexes of the images. So in that case, we want to be jumped back to the very first image. And same applies if the current index is greater than the total images. In that case, again, since there is no image with that index, again, we want to be jumped back to the very first image. So in that case, current index will become 0. So that means we jumped from the very last index to the first index. Once we have set the current index properly, now we have to bring in the image depending on the index. Let me write down the logic first and then I'll explain how does it make the images move left or right when we click on the respective buttons. Okay, so now let's explain how does these 2 lines of code make the image slider work. So as you can see over here, we are creating a constant with the name translate x, and we are basically giving it whatever is the current index. So when the program first starts or when the page loads in the browser, then at that time current index is 0. So basically whatever the current index is, we are negating it. So if we negate a 0, it will return back the 0, and then we are multiplying it by 100. So 0. So first time it's going to be 0 times 100, that is 0. So translate x value will be 0. Then on the next line we are saying we are basically accessing the slider div, and using style.transform property we are setting a CSS transform property on this slider div. And over here basically we are calling the translate x sort of function from the CSS, and to this we are passing this value. Whatever value is over here, we are passing that value and we are converting it into percentage sign. So first time it's 0, so this whole thing will be slider.style.transform x to translate to 0%. That means do not make any changes. So initially there won't be any change, but when the current index changes to 1, then -1 times 100 becomes -100%, and over here it will become slider.style.transform equals translate x to -100%. When index x is 2, then the value will be -200%. When index x is 3, then the value will be -300%. Okay, so this is how it will compute. Now let's try to understand visually how does this logic works. So when the program loads, this dotted rectangle is basically our slider div, and as we know, it contains certain number of images. Initially we are seeing the first image over here, but we know that second image is next to this first image, and third image is next to second image, and fourth image is next to third image, and so on. But because the overflow property for the parent container div for this slider is set to hidden, that's why we don't see these images. We only see the image which is currently within the dimensions of this slider. The next time when we click on the right arrow, the current index will turn to 1, and as a result this will return as 100, and this whole thing will be 100%, but -100%. So what we are saying is that with respect to the original position of the slider, that is those red dots over here, move its contents 100% in the left side, because this translate x is -100%. So we are moving it towards the left side. So what will happen is that with respect to this slider, that is this dotted, the contents will shift 100% to the left like this. Yeah, something like that. So as a result, we will see this image 2 in the screen now. This part is in the overflow part, so it's hidden. Likewise, these two are in the overflow side, so these are also hidden. We see the image 2 in the slider div. Now let's say if we again click on the right arrow and current index turns to 2. So 2 times 100 means, so -2 times 100 will give us as a result -200% to the left. So now again this slider div will figure out with respect to the with respect to its original position, that is this red dotted rectangle, how much the contents, that is these images, needs to be moved such that with respect to this original position of the slider, the images have been moved -200%. So we have already moved -100%, we only have to move just one more 100% to make it -200%. So as a result, we will see image number 3 in the slider div dimensions or slider div screen. Now let's suppose instead of clicking the right arrow, we click on the left arrow. So this current index will again turn back to 1, -1. So now we are saying that move this slider 100%, just 100%. So again, with respect to the original position of the slider, which is this dotted rectangle, it will try to figure out the distance of these images. So currently, these images are -200% towards the left. So it will push slightly back, and as a result, we see just this image back into the slider area. So this is how this whole logic works, and make the images scroll left and right when we click on the respective arrows. I hope now you understand the logic. So let's get on with the rest of the project. Now let's go and have a peek at the browser. Okay, there's something wrong. The left arrow is not visible. Let's go to the CSS properties, and for these arrows over here, we are going to set the index to be, let's make it 10. So in this way, these arrows have higher index, z index, than the rest of the elements. Okay, so now it's visible. Now click, nothing happened. Click, nothing happened. Okay, so I did some offline troubleshooting because I wasn't sure what the problem was, and I didn't want to confuse you either, so I did it offline. Anyway, the problem is, if you notice over here, I have put in this console log message to display the current index, and see what happens. let me refresh the page. This will be equivalent to loading the page for the very first time in the browser. So refresh. Now let's go to the developers tools. Now if you notice, it displays two messages, 5 and 0. So we only have one console log message. So what is happening is that even though we haven't clicked on the page, we have just loaded the page into the browser, but for some reason this move slide function has been already executed twice. First for this left button and then for the right button. This was not supposed to happen. This is a callback function and it should only execute when we click on any of these buttons, left or right. So why is this happening? The reason is I have made a mistake. If you notice over here, I have put in with this callback function these parentheses. So when you put parentheses with any callback function, the function executes immediately rather than waiting for this event to get triggered. So we were supposed to just call the function without any parentheses. But the problem is we can't do that because we are passing in initial values as parameters. So we have to provide this -1 for the left button and 1 for the right button as the initial direction values. So how can we sort this problem out? Well, the solution is we have to attach or call bind function. So in this context, what the bind will do is that it will bind this parameter with this move slide function, but does not execute it. Well, in reality, actually another function gets created, but let's not get into it. The simple way to understand over here is, since we cannot pass any parameters to any callback function because that will make the callback function immediately get executed, so we can bind the parameters using the bind method. We have to do the same to the bind over here as well. Now hopefully that has resolved the problem and we don't need this, or let's keep it and let's see when we load the web page and does not click on any of the buttons, do we still see those index values that we were seeing previously? Okay, so let's refresh and now let's check the developers tools, and as you can see there's nothing over here. Okay, so that means it has worked. Now let's click on these buttons. Buttons. Nothing happens. This bind actually needs two parameters. The first one is going to be the object to which we want to bind this function, and the second one is the value for this function. Since in our case we don't have any object to which we want to bind it to, so the first value is going to be null. Let's give it another try. Click, and it works now. Okay, so I hope this is clear now. Now with this, we are done with the sliding logic. Let's move on to styling the rest of the divs. So what we are going to do first is that we are going to give it background image to the whole web page so that we can see the glassmorphic effect. Okay, so since this section is called property details, so let's go up before the slider container. Property details. Okay, let's give it position relative, which seems unnecessary at the moment, but it has its use that you are going to see in a minute, but you have already seen in the previous videos as well, because the morphic effect, it comes with the before element, not with this actual element. So before element will use this position relative as the anchoring point. Okay, then let's give it now background image. So let's use this combined property background, and we are gonna use URL. So the image is in images folder, and I think we are gonna use realestatePro.jpg, and then the rest of the combined properties. So first of all, we don't want this image to be repeated, so no repeat. Then now we have to define the background position. So from which position the image should be start placing. So we want it from the left and top position. Then the background size, for which we want it to cover the whole area, which is the whole section. Okay. Now let's go move on to the before element of this section. So property details before content. This is very important property. Otherwise, no matter what you do, none of those effects will be visible. So content is going to be empty. Position, let's make it absolute. So now this position is going to refer to this position as its anchoring or referencing point. So we want the top of this element to be exactly where the top of this position property starts. So top 0, left 0, and right 0 as well. That means cover the entire area of this property details. Now for the glassmorphic effect, so let's use background color. Okay, RGBA. Since we have been using this a lot, so we are using the same one, 255.0.2. We might have to change this property, but let's see. Background filter property, and the specific one from the background filter that we are using is blur property, and the value, let's make it 7 pixels. So this top left and 0 covers basically defines the width. Now for the height, let's make it 100% of the parent, which is this property details. Let's see. Okay, let's check in the browser its effects. Okay, so we can see the glassmorphic background image. Okay, but we have one problem, which is where is our text? The divs that contain text. So what we are going to do is that we are going to give this property details some z index, and it has to be lower than the rest of the elements. So what we are going to do is that we are going to first of all define a property details. Let's give it z index, let's give it -1, and we should give the same z index to, let's make it 0. So this one, the before element has a higher z index than property details. I think, okay, let's make it -10, and this one -1. Okay, now it's visible. So this is one div, the second one, that's its title h2, and here is the other div. Now we should start working on this div. There should be some text here. Okay. Okay, let's go to the HTML and see its content. Okay, so we have a div called basic info, class name basic info. Then we have a paragraph lane with the class name lane and city and bedrooms. Okay, so let's start with the basic info. So let's go down, and since we can actually just write basic info, but I'm not sure, actually I don't remember if we have used this class name in our style.css file. Just to be safe, let's prepend it with the parent class. So property details basic info. So a basic info class whose parent is property details class. Okay, so for that, let's give it some, first of all, let's give it some font size, and let's start with 1.5 frame. Background color is going to be 01372E, so it's a shade of dark green. Okay, then padding all around. So padding, let's make it for top and bottom, let's make it 2 frame. For left and right, let's make it 5 frame. Oh, we don't need this space over here. Maybe we should change the text color as well, because it's not visible at the moment. Then we will figure out how to solve this problem. Is going to be white for the text. Okay, good. Now let's start out this problem. We want this green strip to stretch out throughout the width of the browser. We don't see this div stretching out the whole width because this div is a child of this section, and for the sections we have defined certain padding. So this div is respecting that padding. Now we have to tell it otherwise. So the way we are going to resolve this problem is by using negative margins. Well, if you think about it, the parent, which is the section, has a padding. Let's say it's 20 pixels. I'm not sure how much padding we have assigned, but let's say it's 20 pixels. So that's why there is some 20 pixel space over here and 20 pixel space over here. So the parent acts inward space between the container and its contents, whereas margin by default are the space outside the container or any element. So if we assign any margin to any element, it will add some space outside that element. Now imagine if this div also have some margin assigned to it, then it will add more space between this div and its surrounding area, which is over here. But we don't want to increase this distance, rather we want to decrease this distance. So instead of adding some margin, we are going to give it negative margins. So what negative margin will do is that it will decrease the distance between the edges of the container and its surrounding area, which is this part. So if we give this div minus 20 pixels, so it will decrease the distance between this edge and its surrounding area. As a result, this div will stretch out and end over here at this side. Likewise, if we give some margin over here as well, which is minus 20 pixels in our case, then it will try to decrease the distance between this edge and its surrounding area. So it will stretch out minus 20 pixels. The net effect will be this div covers the whole width of this browser width. So even though we are giving it negative margin, it is cancelling out the padding of the parent div. As a result, we are seeing a much bigger div over here, which stretches out and covers the whole width of the browser screen. So let's do it. So this is the section property details, but it doesn't have any padding assigned, but there is padding defined in the style.css file. So let's open this and check. There it is. Let's go to generic section element. Over here we have given it padding top and bottom 2 rem. Okay, this is 5 rem. Left and right is 5 rem. So we have to give this same margin, same negative margin to the div property details div. So no, basic info div. Okay. So margin left is going to be minus 5 rem and margin right is going to be minus 5 rem as well. Okay, good. So this problem has been solved. Now probably we should increase the font size over here. Yeah, some paddings between the different rows and increase the font size. Okay. Font size, let's make it 2 rem first. 2 rem paragraph. Or maybe we don't need to define this. Let's comment this out for the time being. And over here in the parent, let's define line height. If font size is 2 rem, so for the line height, let's make it 2.5 rem. Maybe we should increase the line height. 3 rem. Okay, the first one is capitalized as well. Okay, so I think this is the name of the property. So any random name is given for the identification. So let's go to details.html and first of all create that paragraph or heading. Okay, so this is basic info. Let's define h3 and property unique name. Let's make it h3. Do we have any properties defined for the h3 in our CSS? Okay, this is it. 1.8 rem and padding, nothing else. Okay, so let's give it font weight, make it 600 and see the effect. Property unique name. Okay, we have to bring it back over here. So text align left. Yeah, that's better. Line height, let's make it 4 rem. Okay, that's good. And let's transform capitalize. Okay, good. I think it's fine for the time being. Now let's move on to the details section. So the div is details info. Details info. Maybe we should increase these font size of these icons. So since we know they are inside the spawn. Okay, so this is basic info and Okay, these two are the fonts, bed and bathroom. So let's start with basic info and these fonts inside it. So font size, let's give it, what's the font size in general for this whole div? It's 2 rem. So for the icons, let's make it 2.5 rem and see how big they look. Maybe we should make it 3 rems. Yeah, I think that's better. Okay, now we can actually move on to property details part. So property details info. So we are on the details info section. So what we are going to do is that let's start with this basic info. Copy this and see if we need to change or delete or add something. So font size 2 rem, maybe this is too much. We need 1.4 rem. Background color shouldn't be green. I think it's a white color, but let's wait. Padding all around. Padding. Yeah, let's keep the same. Color of the text is white. Margin and padding, do we need it? So negative margin and padding, we don't need it. Or do we? Yeah. Okay, we need negative margins because this div is also stretching out and covering the whole width. Line height 4 rem. We don't need this much line height. Let's make it 2 rem. So the font size over here is 1.4 and the line height is 2 rems. Maybe we should increase line height. Let's make it 2.5 rem. One line height. Oh yeah. I was looking at the demo project. So background color for this div is white. Okay, the text color can't be white, otherwise it's invisible. Okay, good. Increase the font size to 1.8 rem and line height 2.5. Let's see. Let's also make it 2.8. So 1 rem's height. The difference are 1 rem height between the font size and the line height. Okay, unique property features go here. Detailed property description goes here. So this one also needs to come over here. This is H2. Copy. Paste and H2. Text align is left. Okay, good. We need some padding. Padding top and bottom. Top and bottom, let's make it 3 rem. Left and right, we don't need any padding, so 0 rem. Okay, that's good. That's good. Now we don't need any margin because this form we will move it over here, this area. Okay, let's worry about it later. But for the time being, I have forgotten 2 things. I need to fix them. Okay, so when we are making sure that these 2 divs stretch out and cover the whole width, we gave it negative margins and it has worked. But in order to make it foolproof and make sure that it works under all the circumstances, we have to give it explicit width as well. So let's go back to the basic info. Okay, so over here, after defining the negative margin and height, let's give it explicit width, and this time it's going to be calculated by 100% width of its own parent, which is whatever width it inherits from the parent, then plus we have to add these negative rems that we have given to the margin left and margin right. Since it's 10 rem in total, so we are going to add it. Okay. So even though it doesn't have any visual effect, but now this has made our website more foolproof. We have to do the same for the next div as well, which is details info. Okay. There is one more thing that we need to do, which was for the arrows. So if you remember, where are the arrows, the left and right arrows for the slider that we have defined? Okay. So over here, where are the arrows? Over here, we have given it top 50%. So what this did, it brought the arrows 50% down from the top over here in the center. Now over here, the difference isn't as much visible, but I think you can still see some difference. If you notice, the space over here is slightly less than the space over here. That means these two arrows aren't exactly central. This is because when we define the top 50%, so it started placing this element exactly where it's 50% from the top. So the rest of the element is placed downwards. So that's why over here you can see slightly less space than over here. Had this element been a bit bigger, let's say it was some image, then it would have been placed like this over here. But we want it to be exactly in the center no matter what. So after defining the top, we have to push it 50% up with respect to its starting position. So whatever position it has been placed, we have to push it 50% up. So it will be start placing over here like that. Okay, so to do that, we are going to say transform, and we are going to translate vertically minus 50%. Okay, good. Now if you notice, the space seems to be equally divided between over here and over here. So when we define top, so the top placed this element exactly at 50% from this position, and the transform and translate pushed it upward with respect to its original dimensions of the element. So this element was placed over here like that, and then from that position the translate pushed it 50% up over here. As a result, now you can see they are properly aligned. The space is equally divided, and we can see that these elements are exactly in the center. Okay, now we can work on this this form. So we have to push it and place it over here, something like that. So currently our form is over here, so we have to move it and place it over here. So what's the name that we have given to this form? Property contact form. We are not going to use this class name because this is the class name that we have given in our style.css file, and this form is basically present on the landing page. If we define any further properties over here, then the form on our landing page will also get affected. So we wanted all the properties that are defined over here to be present in this form as well, but the additional properties we will define in this class. So copy, and now let's go down and place it over here. Okay, let's make it position. In fact, let's not use position. Let's again use transform and translate properties. So translate, since we are going to push it vertically as well as horizontally, so translate. Now let's start with, we want to push it upwards. Okay, let's see. So this is where the form is. We have to push it somewhere over here horizontally and then over here vertically. So for the x-axis, let's push it 60% towards the left, and for the y-axis, let's push it minus 100% towards the top. Okay, so this is where the form is. We probably have to decrease the size, but let's worry about it in a bit. But let's push it a bit further over here and a bit further up over there. So let's make it 110, and let's make this one 80. Furthermore, 140, and this one, let's make it 100. Okay, so we are going to push it a bit further up, slightly up, and then we should decrease the size of this whole form as well, because it's too big as it is. So maybe 150, and we can use scale property to decrease the size. So let's make it slightly bigger than 50%. So if you make it 0.5, that means 50% or half. So let's make it 0.7 and see the effect. Okay, so I think the size is fine, but we need to push it a bit further above. So let's make it 160, minus 160. Yeah, I think this is better. Okay, so this is how it looks. Now we have to look how does it behave responsively. So okay, so this is 1200 pixels. I think everything is fine. Okay, we don't need to make any changes. Now let's take 768 pixels. Oh, there's something horribly wrong. We can see this white space over here. That's because the form has been pushed out. So that's one problem. The other is we can't see this hamburger menu icon that's supposed to appear once we are in the 768, so that we can click on it and see the drop-down menu. So where shall we begin fixing the problems? So I think in order to figure out how to start fixing the problem, we are temporarily making this form invisible. So over here, let's define media queries for max width 768 pixels and copy this form class name, paste over here, and let's temporarily display none. Okay, so this is how it looks. Okay, so now we have to figure out why this image is too big to fit in this width. The reason is, let's go to the slider container. Okay, over here. So we have given it two properties, width 100 viewport width and max width 800 pixel width. So we are saying the width should be the 100% of the viewport width, which when we are in 768 is less than 800 pixels. So this property is not being violated. But the problem is that this is being placed over here. That means a part of it is being pushed outside over here. Now because the section has some padding defined, therefore this container is respecting this width as far as its initial placement is considered. But when we reach over here, because the width is 100% viewport width, so over here this container has no choice but to overflow out of this part over here and disrespect the padding defined over here. So that's the reason. So now we have to tell it shouldn't be 100% 100 viewport, rather it should be 100% of the parent. And the parent of this is still the property details section, but now it will respect the paddings, and subtracting those paddings, whatever is the total width occupied by this property details, that width will be assigned to this slider container. Okay, now as you can see, the paddings are being respected. Okay, so this problem is sorted out. Now we have to figure out why we can't see this drop-down menu. The reason is, let's go to the details.html. And over here, if you notice, we have two CSS files, slider and style. This style file is making this menu icon invisible by default. But then through JavaScript, which is defined in the, let's go to index over here. In this script file, there is JavaScript logic defined, which makes that menu icon appear at the right time. And because we don't have this JavaScript file linked with our details.html file, therefore, since that logic is not present, so that logic is not working. So we are going to paste it over here. And now hopefully we will be able to see that hamburger icon. Okay, so we have this hamburger icon present. So this part is sorted as well. Now let's go to slider and make the form visible again. So let's comment this out and see where this form is present. So now this form is overflowing out of the viewport area. So we have to fix this. So let's copy this. Paste it over here. Now translate, instead of 100%, let's make it 60%, and we have to push it down. So let's make it 120%, minus 120%. And scale, let's decrease the size. Okay, this is how it looks. We need to push it a bit further over here and a bit down as well. So let's make it 55% and let's make it 100%. 100%, and for the scaling, let's make it 0.6. It's 550. Okay, so I think it's fine. The font size is fine as well. Again, where is the drop down? Oh God. This problem is not sorted yet. So what we can do is, let's go for the property details, that is the section width, let's make it 100% and overflow hidden. Yeah, it's fine. Let's check 1200 again. Okay, good. We need to have certain rows and height column as well. So why isn't it working? Let's check in the HTML first. So we haven't given it any rows or explicit rows or columns. So rows, let's make it 5 rows. Okay, this is better, but maybe we should increase the rows. Let's make it 8 rows. Yeah. Okay. Now it's fine. Now again go back to 768. 768. Yeah, I think this is fine. Now check 480. For 480, instead of making this form, contact form present over here, let's place it over here because it's too congested for the form to be present over here. So what we can do is, let's go down. Media query for the max width 480 pixels. Let's copy this. Let's translate back to original position and scale 1. Okay, that's good. We should put in some space over here. So margin top, let's make it 2 then. Yeah, I think that's good. Now let's check one more time. 768. Now check 1200. Good. Okay. And with this, we are done with the front end side of the Realtor website. There are still some things that we need to put into place, but that will only happen when we have our backend. For example, let's go to the featured. When we click on it, we want to be taken to the details page, but the details page of this property. But that means we have to associate a click event with the card. But because the URL needs to know the ID of this property in the database, so until we know that, it doesn't make sense to associate that click event listener. So this is one thing that we need to do, but that will only happen when we have our backend. The other thing, once the contact form message has been sent, we need to receive toast notification to let us know if the message has been received successfully or something went wrong. So again, that toast notification can only be triggered once the backend has successfully sent the message. So since this is reliant on the backend logic, so that part will also be incorporated once we have our backend. Otherwise, our front end for the Realtor website is complete. In our next video, we will start working on our backend. I hope you like this video and you want to encourage me, then please don't forget to like the video, watch it till the end, comment, share and subscribe. Thank you so much. Happy coding.